When people think of intelligence agencies, they picture them fighting terrorism or spying on rivals like China and Russia. But what if the real battleground for intelligence operations isn't the Middle East or Asia, but Europe? Leaked documents from The Guardian, Der Spiegel, and The Intercept reveal that the CIA is deeply embedded in European politics, business, and security. From mass surveillance and political influence to economic espionage, U.S. intelligence operations extend far beyond what most realize. While Washington justifies these activities as countermeasures against Russian cyber threats, Chinese economic expansion, and terrorism, critics argue that this is less about security and more about ensuring U.S. dominance over Europe. Some European governments cooperate, others resist, and China and Russia are pushing back with their own covert strategies. By the end of this deep dive, you'll understand how the CIA operates in Europe, who is involved in intelligence wars, how rival powers like Russia and China are fighting for control. Now it's your turn. Is the CIA protecting Europe or controlling it? Drop a comment below and let's discuss. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dive analysis. The CIA's long history of influence in Europe. Since its founding in 1947, the CIA has not merely been an observer in Europe, but an architect of power, actively shaping the continent's political and security landscape. During the Cold War, one of the most infamous examples of U.S. covert influence was Operation Gladio, a NATO-backed paramilitary network designed to resist Soviet expansion. While officially framed as a defensive measure, later investigations revealed that some Gladio-affiliated groups were linked to far-right extremist movements and political sabotage, a reality that came to light through Italian parliament investigations and was later confirmed by BBC and Der Spiegel. However, the end of the Cold War did not mark the end of CIA influence in Europe. Instead of countering communism, the agency redirected its focus toward ensuring long-term U.S. dominance on the continent. It became deeply involved in shaping NATO policies, influencing the European Union's strategic direction, and securing U.S. corporate interests in European markets. This shift in priorities ensured that even as the Soviet Union collapsed, Washington's control over European affairs remained intact. Now, with China flooding Europe with economic investments and Russia intensifying cyber warfare, the CIA's presence in Europe is not only persistent, it is stronger than ever. The battleground may have changed, but the strategy of maintaining control remains the same. Mass surveillance. The invisible power play. What if the world's most powerful intelligence agency wasn't just monitoring its adversaries, but also keeping a close watch on its own allies? In 2013, Edward Snowden's revelations exposed that the NSA had been spying on German Chancellor Angela Merkel, triggering a massive diplomatic scandal that shook transatlantic relations. European leaders expressed outrage, demanding answers from Washington. But instead of scaling back its surveillance, the US expanded its intelligence network across Europe, strengthening its monitoring capabilities under the justification of counterterrorism and security. A 2024 investigative report by The Guardian revealed that the CIA had infiltrated confidential European energy negotiations to steer policies away from Russian gas, ensuring that EU nations became more reliant on American energy suppliers. At the same time, U.S. intelligence agencies have leveraged AI-driven surveillance systems, allowing them to track European political leaders, monitor financial transactions, and analyze real-time movements of key decision-makers. Washington defends these operations as necessary precautions to protect Europe from Russian cyber warfare and terrorist threats, arguing that intelligence cooperation is essential for collective security. Critics, however, claim that this level of surveillance has less to do with European safety and more to do with ensuring U.S. geopolitical control, influencing policies from behind the scenes while keeping European governments under constant watch. Political manipulation. Does Europe really choose its leaders? Europe is home to some of the world's most respected democracies. But how independent are these elections when global superpowers hold the reins of influence? While there is no direct evidence of CIA-led election interference in Europe, multiple investigations confirm that Washington applies strategic media influence, diplomatic pressure, and economic leverage to shape political landscapes in its favor. In 2024, Handelsblatt reported that U.S. officials pressured German lawmakers to maintain strict sanctions on Russia, despite growing concerns among German industries about the severe economic impact. Similarly, a 2023 report from La Repubblica revealed that U.S. diplomatic efforts sought to weaken Italy's pro-Russian political factions, influencing internal government alliances behind the scenes. Unlike in Latin America or the Middle East, where U.S. election interference is well documented, there is no direct proof that Washington manipulates European elections through covert operations. However, by shaping media narratives, exerting policy pressure, and leveraging economic dependencies, the U.S. has the power to steer political outcomes without ever tampering with a single ballot, raising critical questions about the true independence of European democracies. Economic espionage, controlling Europe's wealth. Economic dominance has become one of the most significant battlegrounds for intelligence operations in Europe, with U.S. agencies allegedly using covert tactics to protect American corporate interests at the expense of European competitors. While Washington frames these actions as necessary to counter financial threats from adversaries like China and Russia, critics argue that they amount to economic warfare designed to maintain U.S. supremacy. In 2024, Le Monde reported that Airbus, one of Europe's largest aerospace companies, became the target of a damaging intelligence leak allegedly orchestrated by the CIA. The leaked internal documents cast doubts on Airbus's financial stability and corporate integrity, tarnishing its reputation just as it was competing for high-profile international contracts. Meanwhile, Boeing, its American rival, secured key deals, prompting speculation that the leak was not coincidental but part of a broader intelligence-backed strategy to tilt the playing field in favor of U.S. industry. Similarly, a 2023 to 2024 Financial Times investigation uncovered covert U.S. surveillance on European banks, officially justified as an effort to track Russian financial networks and enforce sanctions. However, financial analysts argue that this surveillance provided Wall Street firms with an unfair strategic advantage, giving them early access to sensitive market data that allowed them to outmaneuver European financial institutions in global economic dealings. These cases raise a fundamental question. Are U.S. intelligence operations in Europe truly about security? Or are they about ensuring that America maintains an economic stronghold over its closest allies? NATO, a CIA Trojan horse. NATO was founded in 1949 as a military alliance intended to safeguard Europe from external threats, primarily the Soviet Union. However, in recent years, the role of NATO has come under scrutiny, with growing concerns about whether the alliance truly serves European security, or if it has evolved into a geopolitical tool for maintaining U.S. military dominance over the continent. While Washington insists that NATO remains Europe's best line of defense, critics argue that its structure allows the U.S. to exert disproportionate influence over European military decisions. A 2023 Politico investigation exposed how U.S. intelligence and diplomatic pressure played a decisive role in shaping NATO policies, particularly in response to the war in Ukraine. European governments initially had divided opinions on the extent of military support they were willing to provide to Kiev, with major players like Germany and France expressing concerns about economic fallout and military escalation. However, according to leaked diplomatic communications, U.S. officials privately lobbied European NATO members to increase military aid despite these reservations, arguing that a strong response was necessary to prevent further Russian aggression. At the same time, Washington has actively opposed efforts by European leaders to establish a more independent military strategy. French President Emmanuel Macron has repeatedly called for strategic autonomy, advocating for a European-led defense initiative that would allow the EU to reduce its reliance on U.S. military leadership. However, Macron's proposals have faced intense pushback, with some analysts suggesting that U.S. intelligence and political figures have worked to undermine European defense independence in favor of maintaining NATO's current U.S.-led structure. This has led to a fundamental question. Is NATO still about protecting Europe, or has it become a mechanism for Washington to dictate military policies in the region? If European nations were to move toward a more independent defense strategy, would the U.S. permit it? Or would it take steps to ensure NATO remains firmly under American control? The Trump Factor: How U.S. foreign policy in 2025 impacts Europe. With Donald Trump leading in 2025 polls, Europe braces for a potential shift in transatlantic relations. His first presidency saw frequent clashes with NATO, threats to reduce military commitments, and a foreign policy that prioritized America first over traditional alliances. If he returns, will the CIA step in to maintain U.S. influence behind the scenes? Trump has long criticized NATO, calling it obsolete, and questioned why the U.S. should continue defending Europe without greater financial contributions. If he scales back military commitments, NATO's unity could weaken, potentially emboldening Russia in Eastern Europe and forcing the EU to rethink its defense strategy. A reduced U.S. presence might also intensify covert CIA operations, expanding surveillance, pressuring European governments, and strengthening intelligence ties to maintain Washington's influence despite diplomatic shifts. Meanwhile, China and Russia could seize the moment, with Beijing expanding economic ties and Moscow exploiting divisions through cyber warfare and energy dependence. If Trump distances himself from NATO, could this mark the decline of U.S. dominance in Europe? Or will the CIA work in the shadows to preserve control? Is the CIA protecting or controlling Europe? One thing is certain: the CIA isn't just observing Europe, it's actively shaping its trajectory. But the key question remains: is this about protection or control? Is U.S. intelligence truly safeguarding Europe? Or is security simply a cover for maintaining geopolitical dominance? And if the CIA were to step back, would Europe be safer? Or would China and Russia move in to fill the power vacuum? Who really controls Europe? Is it the CIA pulling the strings from the shadows? Is Beijing tightening its grip through economic expansion? Is Moscow exploiting divisions to regain influence? Or does Europe still determine its own fate? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's discuss. Like, share, and subscribe for more deep dive geopolitical analysis.